All right. So, yo, what's up, family? So this is a legendary moment for Como Design Studio. Today, we're interviewing Amy Lima, who is the founder of Diversify Design, and she also was a design apprentice at Pinterest. So the reason I wanted to interview Amy is because I feel like in a time where the job market is saturated with a lot of people going to boot camps, struggling to find jobs, and design blowing up as much as it has, I think that Amy is really like forged a path for herself where she looks like a design veteran who just cut through all the noise, right, of the job market. And so what I hope that you take from this conversation today is some of the wisdom that she has around paving a path for yourself when the odds may not seem in your favor. So with that, I'll let Amy introduce herself because she's probably doing some stuff that I probably don't know about because she's a go-getter. So yeah, Amy.
Man, what an intro. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and yeah, just be part of such an important conversation. I mean, yeah, a little bit about me. Happy to give a bit of a short intro. So I'm Amy Lima. I'm a first generation American by way of Brazil. And that identity, that kind of intersectional, interculture identity has kind of been formative to shaping my lived experience and also professional experiences. So in a previous life, I was working in the music industry, primarily in the live event space. I was producing live events for a few years, managing artists directly for a bit. And what I really loved about just that work was being able to bring people together, forge connections in real time, wear many hats, right? I was kind of, all over the place, but really connecting people to the art and the experiences that they loved, right? That felt like, some sort of magic to me at the time. But I've always been very digitally native, very fascinated and excited, enthralled by the design and tech space, but always kind of intimidated by it. It was kind of like a quiet fascination, right? I didn't tell a lot of people about it. I was like, oh, like, you know, how does one even step into, a field like that? Maybe I should have gone to technical school or studied computer science. I studied econ, totally unrelated. So I thought maybe I would have had to go to design school. I didn't consider myself a traditional artist, even though in a lot of ways I am, right? So all these things that kind of, kept me from diving into it, fully giving my whole self to it. But when I finally did, it was the pandemic. So not long ago, I was like, all right, enough's enough. The time is now for me to just explore what this world is about. What even is product design? Like, what is this field? What does it mean? And the more I learned about it, the more I saw myself in everything, in every space, right? And the job descriptions, what makes, a strong designer, a strong design thinker. And I was like, whoa, this is just how my brain has always worked. Like I think that there's, a path here for me. And that's kind of how I dove in head first. And lots of steps and things in between, but that's kind of, the long and short of it.
Got you. So yeah, Amy, I want to start from the very beginning. Like, where'd you grow up? I think you come from New York, but I might be wrong.
New York adjacent. So I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in Jersey, just North Jersey, just other side of the river.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, grew up in, a very classic suburb. One of the best things about it though, and this is something, it's really interesting actually. It's something that myself and all of my peers that I grew up with, we realized once we kind of graduated from our hometowns, like went to university, like went out in the world, that we did grow up in a very diverse community. So my hometown, West Orange, is very just racially and economically diverse. So, just growing up in that public school system, like in my high school, there was like no separation between, different groups of folks. You didn't really have cliques. Like, you had the smartest people in school who were also jocks and maybe they weren't, and we were all at parties together. Like it was just a very, very level, I guess, social hierarchy in that sort of way. And truthfully, like I consider that to be like really, really instrumental with how I've, kind of like been brought up in the world and kind of like see the world and try to, kind of maintain that spirit. So that's where I grew up. I went to university at NYU, So again, just the other side of the river. So, New York, most diverse city in the world, probably, like I've always like sought out that kind of energy. That's kind of where I thrive and what's most meaningful to me. But then after I graduated from NYU, I actually spent a few years abroad. So I moved to Berlin after graduation for a few years. Backpacked the world for like 6 months before then. I kind of took the long way. So again, this pattern of kind of throwing myself into these situations head first, and diving into the unknown and kind of challenging myself personally and professionally. I guess that isn't new. That's always been kind of an innate spirit.
Mm.
But yeah, kind of made my way back shortly before the pandemic, and that's kind of the inception of this, now design chapter of my life. So moved back from Germany in 2020, early 2020, just before the pandemic, went global, went mainstream. It was like, oh wow, yeah, this is life now. And that's when I, kind of like buckled down and was like, okay, like what do I want? Like, what do I need? This feels like a turning point where like, I want to live as authentically as I can. And what does that mean? And that was kind of the entry point to exploring the world of design.
Mm, mm. Um, so when you were a young person, what did you like think that you were going to be? Like, where did you fit in the social circles of West Orange? Like, who are you? Like, because I think that that has a lot to do with, how you approach life today. Like, what did you aspire
Yeah.
to be? Like, how were you as a young person?
Wow. That's such an that's such an interesting question. So on a micro level, I've always had my hand in something, and
Mm,
like many things,
mhm,
right? So like even in high school, I think I was a part of like 10 clubs. I was just like, always staying after school. I was organizing events. I was a
mm,
writer.
mm.
I was
Yep.
really into poetry. I remember competing in like slam poetry competitions at the time, hosting like literary events. That was always really fun for me. So yeah, really found my space in like, literature, like the arts. I really thought I was going to go down that path. I was also very interested in the sciences. So I
Mhm.
actually applied to universities as a biology and English like double major, right? I was like, I don't know how this is going to come together, but kind of, wanted to be a sort of philosopher. And then socially, I was definitely, and still feel that way in a lot of ways, kind of the connector, right? I was always the type of person where like maybe I'm hanging out with a friend or two, and I know that there's like another half a dozen friends doing something somewhere. I'm going to bring folks together. It's like, can we just like make this happen? Like maybe we have to meet at an in-between point. Where can we hang out? The parking lot of the movie theater, cool. Like that's gonna be our like hangout spot, right? I would throw parties. Like I'd love to just like, yeah, just having that sense of community. And
Mhm.
truthfully, I think a lot of that does stem from, again, like being a first gen American. I'm also an only child.
Mm,
And
mm,
my parents and I are our only family, like, like blood relatives in the States. Everyone else is still back in Brazil. So
mm,
it's kind of, I always kind of grew up neither here nor there, right?
mm,
Kind of in between, I say like cultures, but also worlds. Like in the
mm.
States, I was always, kind of like the funky foreign friend who had like, different treats at her house and celebrated American holidays, kind of weird. I didn't really
Yeah.
know what to do on Thanksgiving. I still don't. But
Mm,
then even in Brazil, when I would go there, I'm kind of the quirky foreign cousin, right? Where it's like, I speak fluent Portuguese, but kind of with like a 90s novella
mhm,
like
mhm.
slang. You know what I mean? Like it's that sense of like, damn, like, all right, who's gonna claim me? Like,
Yeah,
you know
there
what
you
I mean? Is
go.
it anyone? But like, so, and if not, I can't count on it, right? Or at least that's how I always felt, truthfully, like in full vulnerability. So I think that's why I always sought out fostering those community, that kind of community or those experiences for myself. So socially in my social life, like absolutely. And then, even professionally. So I think that's what kind of brought me to work in the music industry, why I loved the live event space so much, just like seeing that energy, those connections being fostered in real time in front of me.
Mm,
And just like having a hand in making that happen. I think that's just kind of like, yeah, like ingrained, like, the fiber of everything that I do. And that's translated to, my fascination with design and doing that at scale, like creating, community
Hmm.
products, social expression, just like this intersection is so fascinating to me. And being able to do that and yeah, the tech and design space is like just the most natural evolution of what I've always been doing, I think.
Yeah, I vibe with that, Amy, because I
Yeah.
I grew up as an only child too, and I know what you're
Yeah.
talking
So
about. 'Cause yeah, my family is from Belize and Nigeria, but
Oh, dope.
I got a few cousins here, but I totally get what you're saying about building community and like finding your tribe and
Yeah.
how that like relates to design, where we have to build communities within organizations, right?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
like it's all a part of your life, and I get that.
Totally.
So like, how did you learn about UX? Because you lived abroad
Hmm.
and then you came back. Um, did you go to like a boot
Right.
camp, or did you see a
Yeah.
YouTube video? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah. So I was always, yeah. So again, when I say it's like, oh, I've always been like interested by it. Like, I mean, I guess you could even, I know it's cheesy to say, but like I even remember the MySpace days, right? And like
Mm,
low key coding my own like MySpace profile and like, choosing like the layouts. And I guess I was designing even back then, right? Like I did learn front end, a six-figure skill when I was like 12, messing around on MySpace. Like, if only I had stuck to that. Imagine. But, so like I always had kind of like like saw things through that sort of lens.
mhm,
But I suppose I first really learned about like, okay, like what this discipline even is, like the title when I was in Berlin. You actually have a lot of graphic designers out there, but a lot of product designers. So it's a bit of a startup hub in Europe. You had tons of like really cool startups there. So I met a lot of people
mm,
actually who were UX designers. And it was funny because like I remember, like you ask people that you meet, it's like, oh yeah, like what do you do? And
mhm,
they're, it's usually kind of just like a quick, like, oh, okay, cool, vibe check. Like, you're just kind of curious or not even. But then I would hear, oh, UX design, what's that? And they would tell me, and I would ask them to tell me more. It's like, oh, what does that mean? They're talking about wireframes and, constructing things from scratch. And would be so like, I would annoy them, like just a simple intro question. I remember to a few people, I would like talk to them for like 15 minutes about their job. How did you even start doing this? Like, I don't understand. So like, again, kind of that quiet fascination, I still kind of kept it to myself. And then it was, yeah, during the pandemic, interestingly, yeah, I wonder sometimes. Yeah, I mean, it really was kind of like the spark, what I credit to be the spark. A good friend of mine from back in Berlin sent me a message. She was doing a coding boot camp at the time,
mm,
and she sent me a message like, yeah, kind of early on in the pandemic, like, hey, have you ever thought of UX design? Like, I think you would be good at this. Like, I think that this makes a lot of sense for you. And I was like, oh my God, this was like the first bit of like external, like, validation, encouragement, like totally serendipitous. I
mm.
hadn't really told anyone about it, right? So that I kind
Universe
of took
sending you
that as like,
messages.
yeah, I took it as a bit of a sign, right? And like, I swear to God, it was like the next day.
Mm,
I was like all in. I was like, okay, let me research this. Like, I need to know what it's about. I was looking into boot camps, like, okay, how can I learn this? And I had researched a bit, boot camps, like even while I was in Berlin. Again, never had the nerve to like fully dive in. But when I, really doubled down and like, I mean, at the time I was spending like 10 hours a day, like just looking into like, okay, how can I acquire this skill? How do people learn? Then I was like, oh, people change careers. People can just like pick this up. You don't necessarily need to go to a 4-year design school. There are other ways to do it. And I'm the type of person where it's like, man, if there's a way, if there's like any sort of way, I
mhm,
can figure it out, right? Like, so long as there's some sort of path forward.
mhm.
And that's kind of how it started. So I give a lot of credit to my good friend Maddie because she really, kind of sparked that in me. But yeah, ultimately, I did end up taking an online boot camp
Mm,
during the pandemic. I enrolled in Design Lab, was the boot camp I took. I
mm.
loved it. I mean, changed my life. So I took that, but also took a bunch of other supplemental courses concurrently. So I didn't just take a boot camp. I kind of, uh, yeah, supplemented that with like a lot of additional learning. I took kind of a holistic approach to it,
And
and that's how I formally learned.
what was some of that additional learning? Like, can you just like name some resources for people who
Of
might
course.
be trying to go down that path too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, first of all, there are tons of free resources, right? So like absolutely utilized those. The most straightforward ones are YouTube. I mean,
Mm,
you have tons of design influencers, right? Who like just provide a wealth of knowledge and resources and like tangible, like skill sharing
mhm,
just for
mhm,
free on YouTube. So really watched a lot of videos from Femke, for example. She's wonderful.
mhm,
Um, Honestly, she's great. Hello, I'm Alexa is also wonderful. I mean, a great designer that I now follow that
mhm,
like he just actually launched his YouTube channel is Rid, Michael Rittering. So spent a lot of time watching that. Uh, Webinars like GA and several other organizations would host like free webinars, like info sessions. Like I would tune in on those. Those are more kind of like qualitative, like hiring best practices, tips and tricks, like how to be successful in a boot camp or as like an early career designer. I would watch a lot of those. I would join. I'm still part of tons of online communities like Design Buddies, Memorisely is great. I would read through the channels. I would like, see advice people were sharing. There are tons of like live events that they host as well. I would be a part of those. And then as far as actual classes, I took classes with Superhi. Huge
mm,
fan of Superhi and their community. I learned so much through them, made such great friends. They have 2 design courses and also creative coding courses, which is super cool. Really easy to get through, super accessible, price wise and everything. So like that wasn't super, super helpful. I did take a shorter boot camp with Memorisely. I took a design systems boot camp, so a little more specialized, but
mm,
that really helped me. I got a bit lucky with this one, but at the time, Dan Petty,
mhm,
who's like, a legendary designer who I follow, he was hosting a UI class, a live UI class for a few weeks, like short group classroom setting and like just practicing UI. So I took that and that was like hugely, hugely helpful. I took, oof, there was a lot. There was a lot. I
How
also took a
you
work.
you
This
you
is an
went all
important
in?
one.
Yeah,
I
you
was
went
all in. Listen,
like
I
how
was like,
did
mhm.
you do this within like a certain amount of time? Like was it a 3 month time span or
Oh God, no. So yeah, I really took kind of like, when I started, and I guess this is important to call out, I really, you know, kind of went in with like a long game
Mm,
approach where I was like, okay, like once I like understood what this was, what it meant, and I was like, I think I can do it and I want to do it so badly and I want to do it well. I want to do it right. I don't care how long it takes.
mhm,
Like like I'm just going to do what I need to do to get great, right? As great as I can be. And
mhm,
I knew that that would take a while. So all in all, between when I first kicked off and by the time I got my first full-time role was about a year, maybe like 11 months, something
mm,
like that,
mm.
10 to 11
Got you.
months.
Okay, that
But was still like considering like the amount of work I was doing. I mean, I was joining hackathons on the weekends. I would
mm,
take
mm,
small, like live workshops when I could. Bite Size UX is a great resource. They would have live 1 to 2 day workshops where you could like pair design. That was super cool. Humanity centered. I learned about the, very holistic, human centered kind of inclusive design process through, sort of like a psychological lens through that masterclass. That was 5 weeks long. So again, I keep using the word holistic, but a very holistic approach, like to just like absorb and learn as much as I can, not only about the craft, but also the industry. And through that, I ended up kind of forming my own design opinions, right? My own personal kind of design philosophy. And I think that that also helped me, not only like personally, but then professionally, right? Like kind of
mm.
stand out and, you know, make a case for myself to, become a member of the team, like have someone hire me because like I did have that vocabulary and those sorts of,
Yeah, it seems like you
opinions to share.
it seems like you have like when I look at your online presence, you have a point of view. Like you
Mm-hmm.
stand for inclusion and you
Mm-hmm.
know like who you are. Whereas I feel
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the people early on in their career, they're not really sure what way to go. They're not sure where to start. And what I see is that a lot of times people get out of boot camps and they're like, oh, I should get a job right away. Like I
Mm-hmm.
I just learned this 3 months ago and
Yeah,
struggling now, but I think a lot of times it's because you're thinking that it's a cookie cutter sort of process, right?
totally.
And just the
Absolutely.
fact that you said it was a year-long thing for you, like you had time to develop.
Absolutely.
So
And
that,
just even what you said, like very early on, I heard, again, I was lots of like YouTube videos, resources, like whenever I could. Um, AJ and Smart is actually a great YouTube channel. I don't know if they're still putting out videos, but at the time they were putting out a ton, super, super helpful. And their CEO, this is like a really cool design and innovation agency out in Berlin, actually. Their CEO, Jonathan Courtney, said in one of his videos, it's not that the market is oversaturated with junior designers, like sure, but that, it's not that simple. It's that the market is oversaturated with just okay junior designers,
mm,
right? So it's not the fact that they're junior that's the problem, but it's just like it's kind of, to be frank, like it's a lot of just like not great, right? Like still have a lot of room to like grow, and you're just okay. So
mhm,
if you're part of that, like even 5%, that's like just a little marginally better than just okay, you'll always be in demand, like you'll be set, like you've got it. If you've got it, you've got it, right? And maybe that sounds like super simple to
mhm,
other people, but for me, it was kind of like revolutionary. I was like, wait, okay, so like not in like a toxic, hustle culture sort of way, like okay, you need to be extraordinary, but I was like, oh, like I'm gonna push, the limits of what I think is like just okay. Like I don't want to be just like an okay junior designer. Like I want to excel in this field one day. Again, I don't care if it takes 10 years. So I'm
mm,
not in a rush, but like I want to be pretty damn good, right? Like I want to like raise that bar for myself. So that kind of ethos also followed me every step of the way as well. So like in that, 10, 11-month process, it was like with any project I had in my, was doing as part of my boot camp, I like kind of did double the work that was asked and expected of me. When, even my mentor would approve it, I'd be like, I think it could be a little better. How do I like I'll put in the time to make it better. How can I like elevate this, right? Like really, honing in on like the craft and how to like kind of push that forward incrementally every day, just getting like 1% better. And I think that that greatly helped as well. And ironically, playing that long game or having that sort of growth mindset kind of ended up accelerating things for me. Because in the grand scheme of things, a year end to end isn't a lot of time
mhm.
to kind of like get started from 0 to 1, right? In a new career, a new field. So I think it ended up happening even a bit faster for me, specifically because I was taking my time and kind of going slow with it,
Mhm.
right? So there's something interesting there too.
And did you have, like I would think that within a year you have a lot of time to build confidence, but did you have any apprehension or fear
Oh my
about,
God. Hmm.
going after that first role? And, like how did you overcome that fear if you did have any?
Wow, great that's a great question. Absolutely. Imposter syndrome, like classic, of course. Like, I didn't fully own my skill set, my potential. Like I knew I was still just starting out, and to a grand effect, I would still need to get a little lucky, still have someone kind of take a chance on me, bet on my potential other than where I'm currently at. So, like yeah, like I was definitely a bit scared and nervous and like, kind of struggling with that. I think at some point though, I just kind of like was able to separate that, just like tapping into my self-awareness, EQ skills. I also took an EQ. I also took an emotional intelligence uh workshop for designers through Design to Be. Highly recommend. So that helped me there, kind of separating myself from those emotions and being like, okay, let's just like I still need to put myself out there, right? Like whether I'm like scared or not, like this is a necessary step to accomplish what I want to accomplish. So like you need to do it and just go. So kind of like pushing myself to do that. So at the end of the day, it does take a lot of nerve. You know what I mean? To just like you might not fully believe it yourself, but you do just kind of have to like own like where you're at. And I think honestly that helped me because like through having to convince myself that I was confident enough to even apply, even put myself out there, I ended up convincing other people too. It's like, oh, like it kind of worked. Like I kind of like gaslighted myself into being like, yeah, no, like you can do it. And other people are like, yeah, you can. And I'm like, oh, all right, I guess I'm doing it then.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a little bit of fighting against that, just that, that self-doubt and just putting yourself out there and seeing what happens. I mean, I think to some effect, it's like an inevitable step of the process. You kind of have to go against your like natural feelings and just do the damn thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that what I tell a lot of folks is that design is a very emotional process, and
Hmm.
people don't like consider that a lot of times, because when you're starting out, there's a lot of fear that you might have, and then like when you're presenting your work, there's fear that comes with presenting, like, are you good enough?
Yeah.
And then there's fear about leveling up, like how you get there, right? But I see like the way that your mindset is like you have this growth sort of approach where you're
Hmm.
gonna fight through all that, right? So
Yeah,
that's dope. Um,
totally.
within this time that you've been a designer, like what's been the biggest personal challenge for you to overcome?
Wow. The biggest personal challenge, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
it's like exactly what we're talking about, I think. Like which again goes to show like it's easier said than done, but still on a daily basis I kind of struggle with, wait, did I do that right? Like was there a better way? Like do I got it? Like should
Mm-hmm.
I be here? Like, being part of like Pinterest's, kind of inaugural apprenticeship program, like their first design apprentice. It was, like 1,000 people applied and
Mm-hmm.
only one person got the gig. And I'm like, Jesus, like that, in full honesty, like still isn't lost on me. And I still kind of struggle
Mm-hmm.
with that. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, no, like maybe I did earn it or deserve it or like was confident enough to like,
Mm-hmm.
be graced with that kind of life-changing opportunity. It's hard. So I guess, yeah, all to say is like I still struggle with it, kind of like fully owning where I'm at and trusting the process and being like, yeah, no, like you're doing it, you're gonna continue to learn and grow and hopefully it's all up from here. But that's definitely been the hardest part. And that's where I think mentorship is really important. So that's like another important thing to call out as well. I absolutely sought that out big time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had a mentor as part of my design boot camp who's still a mentor to me. We're great friends, like absolutely instrumental in my journey and learning and growth. But I also sought out additional mentors. Like I have like an advisory board that I consider like great, great, great people who were just invested in my, my come up, my success, that were
Mm-hmm.
able to help me in those moments and still those moments of self-doubt where I can, reach out to folks or serendipitously they'll reach out to me and be like, hey, like we see you, like you're doing great, like keep going, and I think that that's been so so helpful. So I also don't have, again, that's another thing about kind of like going at it alone and kind of coming from this non-traditional background. Like I didn't have anyone in my life who I knew that was a designer or even like meaningfully worked in tech, you know what I mean? Like I didn't have like that sort of network where like it even felt approachable or like it still felt and often does still feel a bit intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
My parents have no idea what I do. They're still so proud and supportive. It's very sweet, like classic immigrant parent thing, like, oh, that's nice, sweetie, like you're doing great, we're so proud of you. They have no idea like what it actually is, right? And I'm not mad at it. Like it kind of ends up helping, but in some ways it's like, you know you don't know what you don't know. So like
Mm-hmm.
it's really helpful then to have mentors who are who have been doing this, have a little more lived experience, who can kind of reassure you when you need and be like, yeah, no, like this is where you're at. We can help you get to where you want to be, but like, don't worry, you're good, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Got you. And Amy, like I'm just trying to think because there's a lot that you said like about mentorship and
Hmm.
just like everything that you said I could relate to. Um, but what is it that you like wanted? Like, what's your end goal? with all of this? Like,
Wow.
where do you like see yourself going? Because like you really forged the path, and you talked about that self-awareness. Like,
Hmm.
now that you're in it, like where do you see yourself taking this career?
Man, what a question. All these questions are
The,
so good. They're so tough. It's, yeah, it's hard because I feel like it, it's just been such a whirlwind
mm,
rookie year. You know what I mean? Where it's like been fast and furious and like just so amazing, but like so like just an avalanche of experiences and learnings all at once every single day.
mm,
So I'm still kind of trying to keep up with it, to be honest. And like I'm in a moment where it's like, okay, I kind of want to catch my breath and even understand fully where I'm at now, right? Like, okay, like what's happening here? Like, let me catch up to like how the speed of how things have been going to really assess what comes in the future. I kind of like to leave those things open ended, so I always move with intention. But like, I mean, I never expected I would be here. Like, a few years ago, if you asked me, I couldn't even conceive being like working as a full-time designer. How cool is that?
mm,
So who's to say like, where this will take me, 5, 10 years from now. But I am, starting to see some kind of common themes or pillars,
mm,
right? That are like are
mm,
kind of grounding me in this practice. That's definitely, diversity and inclusion,
mhm,
right? And being an advocate for that, and kind of tying like community work into that as well. So like I'm really fascinated by that, not just through, the product design work that I do, but again, holistically, just as a person in this industry, in this field, how can I amplify those voices? How can I champion, the folks in those communities, help bridge that gap between, opportunity. So, that's kind of diversified design is kind of the first like step
mhm,
into, bringing it to that place. And, like most other designers, like hopefully it's not cliche to say, but I really want to make that impact at scale, right? So, and there's something so, that's what the power of technology, right? And like kind of that ubiquity and working for digital products. So I'm having a lot of fun right now working on, community and social consumer products. Like it's where I'm really finding my groove and makes a lot of sense. And I love that. But, I'm also very fascinated by AI and,
mhm,
emerging technologies. Like I love building from 0 to 1, a kind of
mm,
startup environment, like new novel formats, and it's never been done before. How are we going to, do it and do it well and responsibly and ethically, all these things. So that's all very nebulous and abstract right now. I'm excited for like it to take more concrete shape one day. But when I think of like the future in this field and my role in it, it's being that voice and having that sort of impact.
mhm. Yeah, I think it's important that a lot of people should have a foundation, right? Like you
Yeah,
know where your foundation is, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to like aim at one thing, because there's so many things that you could do based
right.
on that foundation. Uh,
Yeah. And that like authenticity,
yeah, yeah.
and it's interesting because you mentioned earlier, like a lot of folks like kind of don't know like when they're starting off, like what's their like story or not their niche, but kind of like, where they're at. And I'll
Mhm,
admit, like I remember when I struggled with that as well. And I remember a mentor of mine telling me, like, yeah, no, like you want to be known for like something, like that can change, it
mm,
can evolve, you don't have to be tied to it, but like, oh, you're a designer for this, or when people think of this one thing, they think of you. And I'm like, damn, I'm just trying to be a designer, I think. Like, what if I just don't have that? I'm trying to be us out here, be a strong generalist. In a
mhm,
lot of ways that's still true, but he really, challenged me to like think of that. It's like, no, like what excites you, what drives you, like what's your thing, like why are you here? And
mhm,
that's when I started to like really think about my story and like, why I even explored this career in the first place, and why I'm so like, you know bullish on like, I think I can do it.
mhm,
I think I'm like meant to be here and I deserve to be here and I can bring a lot to the table. And that's what I kind of put at the forefront, and in like really like examining my story and my background and understanding how it ties in to like the work that I'm doing, why I'm here in the first place. That ended up creating that space for me. Like that space was already there, in other words, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. All to say is like digging deep into, your background for me was the best way to identify and then kind of solidify that space that I'm trying, not trying to, but like I guess I'm kind of occupying in like a powerful way because it's mine. It's my story, it's my narrative. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of the approach I took.
Yeah, and how do you tell that story? How do you
Mhm.
tell that narrative digitally? Because right now you have
Yeah.
Diversify Design, but are there like actionable steps that you would recommend for somebody? Because I know like when I talk to folks and I say that I
Hmm.
have a YouTube network, they're like, but I don't have that. Like
Yeah.
if you're just
Yeah.
a common designer trying to break in and you're junior, like how do you tell that story to
Yeah. Totally. So that's a really great question. So, like for me, it's like, okay, like what channels like do you have? Like I didn't have like any sort of like online presence. I wasn't trying to be an influencer, like or at least that wasn't like the intention at
Mhm.
the time. It's like, okay, what do I have? I'm on Twitter. Like, I happened to just like use Twitter like as like a meme factory and like, to like get my news. And I was like, oh, like there are lots of designers on there, like,
Mhm.
started creating like a bit of a network there and then just sort of like sharing like my work and like putting myself out there. There's another mentor. I mean,
Mhm.
Dan Petty. I remember when he said this to me as well. Again, another nugget of wisdom that's maybe like a duh moment for other people, but for me it was like, oh. And he said, let people know you exist.
Mhm.
Like super simple, but for me, it like changed everything. I was like, oh my God. And he's like, yeah, like people, like, okay, you can be great. You can be, guess what, the best designer in the world. People won't know who you are if you don't tell them, if you don't show them, if you don't put yourself out there. I was like, damn. So I started, just kind of like sharing a little bit about like my story, where I'm at on Twitter, honestly, predominantly LinkedIn,
Mhm.
cheesy, as it might feel. Like, again, I wasn't one to like post like publicly or that frequently on social media, but that's exactly what LinkedIn is for, and it's
Mhm.
a great tool for that, right? So I started kind of just sharing my work and my story and the intention, just like kind of step by step documenting that on LinkedIn, and got a lot of positive reinforcement, and that sort of became a feedback loop, right? I made tons of connections, like that's where I met some mentors of mine through that. So like the more I shared, the more like positive reinforcement I was getting of like, oh yeah, keep going, like more, you're doing great. And I was like, damn, okay, let me share some more, put myself out there a little more. And then suddenly, people know me for who I am, like who I presented myself as, right? Just because I was doing that authentically and, in the way that made the most sense for me. And it was pretty lightweight, right? Like I already had a LinkedIn. So that was like one approach I took. In my portfolio, I try to put that on the forefront. Like I come from a music background. I add, a personalized playlist to my portfolio to like complement
Mhm.
the browsing experience. And it's like, oh, like these are the songs that like I feel like you can kind of get to know me through this playlist. And like I don't know, it's just something that made sense for me and that like has resonated with people. So like that was interesting to see. Of course, in like my about me page on my portfolio, that for me was like the biggest, like, all right, this is my time to shine. Even if no one reads it, like 99% of people, if they don't read it, but like if 1% of people do, I want them to know who I am, what I'm about. So like I
Mhm.
crafted, a narrative there, and that was my time to like, okay, cool, like I'm authoring this, like I'm telling you, like, who is she? Like, why should you care? Like, I'll tell you exactly why. This is what I'm about. So, I kind of like took that approach, and then if and when I could meet face to face, screen to screen,
Mhm.
with people like this, whether that was, just an intro meeting, casual networking thing, mentorship chat, or an interview, I would let them know when I introduce myself. I'm like, hey, this is what I'm about. Not just like, oh yeah, I'm Amy, I'm trying to be a designer, but it's like I'm a full human outside of this design thing. And I happen to be a designer. And
Mhm.
like this is how it all plays into each other. You know what I mean? So kind of like again, that holistic approach in everything. So a lot of different touch points, like some of them, more maybe some of them more actionable than others, depending on the person.
Mhm.
But just trying to own that authenticity and vulnerability as much as you can.
Yeah, it's a lot of nuggets there. For
It's a
everybody
lot,
after this
hopefully.
to play that back. Which leads me into like my next question about diversified design. Like, how did that come about? And just tell people a little bit about what it is and like how that came to fruition.
Totally. So it really, well, first of all, what it is. So Diversify Design is a talent network and job board for underrepresented designers, designers from marginalized, historically overlooked backgrounds. So that's like predominantly BIPOC designers, first gen or immigrant designers like myself, but also folks from non-traditional backgrounds, right? So like folks who didn't go to design school or maybe don't have a 4-year degree. Maybe you're a college dropout. That's all right. Like you still deserve to be here. Like your perspective and influence matters, right? So it's really, intersectionally a diverse community of designers at every stage of their careers. So it's a talent network. I refer to it as a community because I envision it growing into such. And it's hosted on a third-party platform, which is cool because then one aspect of it is not only is it a job board, but how the talent network works is that design organizations, companies that are hiring specifically for underrepresented talent, they champion that on their teams, can contact candidates directly. So like you're part of the network, you might be passively looking, you might be actively looking for a new role, and hiring managers at top tech orgs can reach out to you directly. Your email's right there. You've kind of been personally vetted by me. Everyone applies with a portfolio. I approve them into the network, and it's kind of like a warm intro. So getting closer to like, not only forming a community, but an actionable community, right? One that provides economic opportunity to
Mhm.
folks. So like, again, like I wanted to have that more actionable impact at scale. So that's what Diversify Design is today. I think hopefully it'll evolve to something much bigger, but that's what it is right now. It's only been around for a few months. And how it came about, I mean, it's really everything we just talked about, right? It's kind of like, okay, like, I'm coming from this, this non-traditional background. I've found that my diverse background and lived experiences have been my biggest strength, like the biggest asset that I've been able to bring to the table so far in my
Mm.
career and in my roles and in this industry. And I want to help bring other people here too. Like I'm so grateful to have a foot in the door and to like be here like every single day. That gratitude isn't lost on me, but I want to do something about that, right? Like I want to help, bridge
Mhm.
the gap for other folks like me to like get through the door, be in these, have a seat at the table, land their dream job and just, oh, claim what's theirs, what they deserve, right? So that's kind of what inspired uh, launching this initiative. Also, a lot of fear and anxiety and self doubt of like, oh God, this is going to be so embarrassing when this is a total flop, and just like a failed, a failed endeavor. But so far, I'm continuing to push it, and hopefully, we'll see it grow from here.
Mhm. And Amy, where does this resilience that you have come from?
Yeah, definitely. God, that's a great question too. Really, I think about again my upbringing and more specifically my family, right? So really my parents. So being an only child in like an immigrant household, kind of in some ways a bit like isolated. I was always very close to their lived experiences
Mhm.
as immigrants in this country, and their storytellers, right, by heart, just like me. Maybe that's where I get it from. So I knew very intimately about what their journey to America was like. They immigrated when they were 18 years old. Wild. All the adversity that they faced, that they still do, discrimination, like moments of obstacles and strife, and just that bold, honestly blind,
Mm.
in a lot of ways, conviction
Mm.
of like, like no is not an option. Like failure is subjective, first of all, but like it, we got to make this work. Like where you're like there's no plan B, right? So like in a lot of ways it's the survivalist mentality,
Mm.
like this immigrant mentality, and that's where that grit comes from of like, okay, we're going to make this work no matter what. Like if it's not plan A, B, or C, we'll make it to plan Z,
Mhm.
and even more so after that. But like the thing's got to work, right? So kind of growing up in that environment, in through living through those scenarios. And there's something about that Brazilian culture as well. Like
Mm,
there's a saying in Brazil, jeitinho brasileiro, which means like there's always like a little way, like
mm,
a little way around anything or into something. And it
mhm,
might not follow any social conventions. It's like, all right, it seems impossible. Like this is a blocked door, but like maybe there's a side door. Maybe you can like get in through the roof, like maybe the basement. You know what I mean? So just this creative problem solving that like just by circumstance and all the obstacles that like we faced growing up, you had to be quick with it and bold and kind of fearless in a lot of ways. And that's kind of and I'm realizing now stepping into this world, into this field, that like damn, I guess some of it did rub off on me, and that's been really impactful, impressionable and impactful. So
mhm.
that's really where that resilience and that grit comes from. 100% is, yeah, my parents immigrant journey and kind of success story making it in this country, because God, it was hard. It's still hard, but it was tough.
Mm-hmm. Got you. Well, I admire everything that you're doing, Amy. And I think it's very inspirational, just like your whole journey. Um,
Mhm.
and did you want to like mention about anything about your dad, like how you saw him working at a factory and like that, how that played a role in all of this as well? Shout out to
Totally.
Pops.
Yeah, yeah. Shout out to Elton Lima. I do have to shout out my mom too, Soraya. They actually work together. So
Mm,
that's been like super cool. And there's definitely something about my mother as well, being like one of like the few females working, like a factory job, like very blue collar. She would always get her hands dirty. It's manual labor, right? And
mm,
she's equally kind of like fearless and like bold in that way. So I think a lot of that rubbed off on me too.
mhm,
But my parents have a 10-year age difference. So my dad came to America first,
mm,
and had to kind of, yeah, he built a life from scratch that then my mother met him a few years into it. So yeah, man, just the story of, yeah, my dad's immigration story is super crazy, mostly in the just whole like going from building something out of nothing. You know
mhm,
what I mean? So like he came to America, he knew that was out of necessity. Brazil was like a non-sustainable future. It was a military dictatorship when he left. So he knew he needed some sort of better life. Could have been anything, but he really wanted to be a businessman,
mhm,
whatever that meant. Could have been anything. So long story short, kind of fell into he kind of fell into factory work. Um, Started learning the trade of metal finishing, very niche at the time, but you had a lot more manufacturing in this country back then. And he went from being an apprentice, actually like accepting like $1 an hour wage
mhm,
just to learn the trade. No one wanted to give him a job, like totally overlooked, worked 14 hours a day. This was after he started off washing dishes for 16 hours a day at a country club when he first moved here. So
mm,
again, that was like the upgrade when he started working for 14 hours a day in a factory with like, some sort of like, business guys. That's when he felt like he made it. And then, just grinded until he eventually opened up his own factory. So he actually ended up buying the business of his first boss, who
mm,
didn't want to give him a job when he first started out. Ended up teaching him the craft. And that guy, it's his old boss, his name was Joe. He told my dad one day, "I wish I had a son like you."
mm,
And my dad said, like, at the time, that was the happiest day of his life, that
mhm,
moment where, like, he had that acknowledgement, he felt seen.
mhm,
So then, he got his factory, he built it from scratch, his pride and joy, it was amazing. And then one day it burns to the ground in the middle of the night. There was a fire in the attic and he kind of lost everything. He didn't have
mm,
insurance. At the time, would have been the equivalent of like $1 million that he
mhm,
would have lost, just burst into flames. So again, that concept of rebuilding then from the ashes. So like, damn, I'm gonna do it again once more. You know what I mean? Like keep
mhm,
going. Like
mhm,
no is not an option. Like we need to like just keep moving forward. Like there's no time to like wallow in this. Like we need to march on and everything about that, and then my mother was a part of that. They were raising me while that stuff was happening. Now they have a kid to worry about. So just like everything about, kind of like just like being out there and like forging a path for yourself when the
mhm,
odds are stacked against you. you might not have the network or resources around you. In the case of my parents, their closest family and confidants, friends were thousands of miles away. You're greatly underestimated. That's like best case scenario. Most often you're like actively being rooted against by systems and like, everyone around you, and still somehow making it, and that exists on the spectrum, what making it is, but still, building a life for yourself, like taking pride in your work, creating something. I don't know, man. That's pretty inspirational to me. So that's kind of, what keeps me going. And I see a lot of parallels there. Anytime I'm kind of like struggling or, thinking about this journey for me, I kind of like equate it in a lot of ways. I mean, I have the easy end of the stick, like by far, right? But I see a lot of parallels there of like persevering, you know, uh, reclaiming that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you that I can do this.
Yeah.
I don't even know how I'm going to do it, but I know I'm going to do it. Um, so a lot of that, that's kind of what keeps me going.
Your dad was an apprentice. You were an apprentice
Right,
at
right.
this, and now your dad was a founder. You're a founder, right? Like yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of parallels there.
exactly. Immigrants are builders,
Yeah,
right? Like we
yeah.
have to be. So it's all part of it.
Mm-hmm. Is there like any last words? Because I know you got to run. That you think junior designers should know about, or just people starting out? Like what's the thing that you wish you knew earlier on that you think other designers should know now?
Mm, wow. I would definitely say a few things. I
Mm-hmm.
would definitely say own your story, right? And all its authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
That means, kind of like identifying like your core narrative, like the essence of you, like your true authenticity, and reclaiming it, putting it at the forefront with full vulnerability. So owning that, trusting the process, which like, God, I know it sounds so cliche, but truly, like with anything else, right? Like it's okay to not really know what's waiting for you on the other side. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that's better, like kind of being open to, the breadth of possibilities that await you at the end of this journey, and just, focusing on getting 1% better every day, focusing on the things that you can control,
Mm-hmm.
and then, trusting that you'll get to where you want and need to be. And then that ties into playing the long game, right? And having that sort of growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that can, that doesn't necessarily mean, there's a lot of constraints there, right? Sometimes you need a job yesterday, right? And then the long game doesn't apply like very explicitly, but it does in a lot of ways when it's a mentality of just upskilling every single day, working on yourself, your craft, forming those design opinions, that design philosophy, just getting 1% better every day. I mean, I'm still doing that. I'm still taking design courses. I'm still practicing outside of, my day job. I freelance, like I'm all in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get a little bit better every single day. So again, like don't never rest on your laurels, and just keep going, and when you do that, especially when you combine those three things, I mean, success, whatever that means for you, is inevitable. It's an inevitable consequence. So I think that's what I would recommend.
Got you, Amy. And just last question, what do you do to balance out the work? Like how are you
Hmm.
enjoying life, and like how do you just live a fruitful life at the end of
Yeah,
the day?
it's definitely about balance. I definitely don't, at times I will admit, like
Mhm.
especially when I was like ramping up and just starting on the boot camp, I definitely put too much on my plate, and
Mhm.
it wasn't manageable at all. These days, like I have great work-life balance. I kind of tap in and out of all these things. I do a few things actually. I'm really into powerlifting. I know
Mm.
that's a bit of a plot twist, but I do that. I've competed in powerlifting competitions. Like the fitness
Mhm.
thing is super cool because it kind of is something totally different that
Mhm.
I'm like committed to and work on, and is like a totally separate part of my life, community, all that stuff. And I think that's hugely important. Similarly, I'm always fascinated by like learning other things. I'm also learning a new language. I've been
Mm.
learning French for about 2 years now. So I do that a few times a week. Again, that's just like a personal goal.
Mhm.
Like I think it's kind of fun. I'm not thinking about design at all. Like it's just another, again, like where we contain multitudes. Like, I'm a full person outside of like my design work. So like making sure that I have those anchors that like I'm prioritizing and tapping into keeps me well-rounded and balanced. I love to travel. I would do that a lot more before the pandemic, right? But like whenever I can, like I was, so grateful I was able to go back to Berlin for my birthday this past April, and that like refilled my cup for like, God, I swear, a whole year. Like that was just like the happiest moment. So yeah, I definitely, it's important to like tune out as well. When I feel myself kind of like burning the midnight oil or doing a bit too much, I do again kind of just try to tap into that self-awareness, separate myself from the current moment and being like, okay, why am I doing this? What am I doing it for? Like, am I burning out? I think I need to take a step back in order to do this more meaningfully with like more intention. So yeah, basically checking in on myself and being like, are we good? Are we doing too much? Like, do we need to take a step back? And this is in anything, also with the lifting thing, I have to do that sometimes. So like that sort of self-awareness, but then also having different anchors, I call them, to ground you outside of, just design and just your professional life. For me, that's been how I've kept that balance.
Mm. All right. Well, Amy, this was a great conversation.
It
I
was
know a
so
lot,
fun.
a lot of people are going to learn from it.
I hope
Where can
so.
people find you online?
Yes, so folks can find me on Twitter. I'm at Amy Lima Bean. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Amy Lima there, my government name. I can include the links and everything, but yeah, you can find me there. Feel free to reach out. I'll try my best to answer, any questions, be whatever resource I can be, and definitely encourage anyone to join Diversify Design, join the collective. There's a really special community forming around there. Have really exciting plans for it and would love to welcome in as much folks as I can.
All right. Appreciate you, Amy.
Maybe Lima, it's all the same. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
For sure. Okay.